tools, and as we were discussing, there's lots of tools that can support the facilitation of learning, but they don't have to be the core focus. However, within looking at our 3-step model, which is from the recommendations in the EEF document, if we look at planning, we've highlighted some that if you're just dipping your toe in the water with this and you're looking at what tools do you start with and what behaviours or skills can that support, we've looked for Jamboard for Google, and we would emphasise that if you're a school that uses Google tools, you can still choose to use, if your network allows, the Microsoft, or vice versa. If you're a Teams school, you can still add in Jamboard, just as we're doing with this call. If you're using them, it can be in early years, it can be just that whole sort of gathering together, mind mapping, sort of graffiti wall, and that works from nursery right through to S6. But if you want your learners to kind of plan out their learning, it's really nice to use as a timeline. So without having to go off and get additional software or anything like that, you can create a nice timeline where young people can post it, add in information, and that works right through. Obviously, the more information you want. If you want to provide a structure, using the background as an image, so using your lesson plan or using the plan of the topic that you might have already created and asking young people to plot where they are and what their learning experiences of and how they're applying is a really nice way to do that with these apps. Sketch notes are everywhere, and if you are lucky enough to be able to draw and add all these little beautiful images that I see everywhere that I aspire to but cannot create, there's lots of apps that are out there. So that pen that you're seeing there is a free app called Teashu School. It's on Apple and Android, but there's Procreate, that's not a free app, but it is available, and lots of art departments might have it. So if you're using Sketchnote, I would even just say, though, if your young people have a device and it has a notes app on it, we do talk about using the notes app for not just typing but for sketching, so that whole mind mapping, writing out core questions, that notation as they're going through, and then we've got at the bottom row Planner for creating out asking young people to plan their learning, creating a planner that's shared with their teacher, so with you or with their maybe a focus group that they might be working on. So yeah, creating a planner, and that again is in Glow. It's free there for everybody, but there's lots of apps available, and you also might be using a different product, and Tim's going to talk about one of them later on. But again, creating out your own plan, identifying learners taking responsibility, them making the judgment of how confident they are, using that judgment of learning concept from retrieval practice, so and metacognition. Where do they know they are? Where do they think they're going to need it? Planning ahead, looking at what they need and what they're going to do. And then we've got class notebook, which is in your team, but they can have their own notebook and they can file all their learning, so they're able to access previous activities, access that prior knowledge, and see where they need to go next, and also revisit their understanding. So you scheduling live interactions. Now that doesn't have to be face-to-face, but if you've got senior pupils using the breakout rooms that are in things like Teams, that can be a really nice way. So looking at where do I know I think I'm going to need support, and asking young people to identify it, and that can be done really nicely using tools like Planner or Teams or Classroom. So if we just have a little look at the end here, I've identified where that also links up to our moderation cycle. So if you're not already familiar with that, I'm sure that you will be, but if you aren't, having a little look at those three. So learners at the heart, and we know that for us, and when we're checking over where our young people are planning their learning and where we're planning it, we could be sharing all of these tools to ensure that our E's and O's are being covered. And OneNote's a really nice way to do that. Laying out the tabs, so it's basically a digital folder if you're not familiar, and having the tabs as your E's and O's, so that young people can track where they've gone through their learning and where they're at. And again, I think Tim's going to refer to something similar for senior phase, but lots of flexibility there. Louise, is it okay to go to the next slide, please? Okay, so for monitoring, there's lots of ways our young people can monitor, again through live interactions with their peers or with their teachers, so that peer-to-peer or teacher-to-teacher. They can look at what strategies they've used, and we can use, again, Teams, Google Classroom and OneNote for that. We can use things like graffiti walls within the classroom team, or if you're using Apple Classroom, Google Teams, Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams. There's also ways to get them to record their learning. So again, that non-digital aspect, it doesn't all have to be done online. So using apps such as Office Lens, so that's a really nice way for them to capture their learning and experiences, capture a screen that might be getting shared with them, and then they've got the digital version of a physical document that they might have created. So if they've done a physical mind map on a bit of paper, or they've created their coursework, they want to upload it, that's a really nice way. It also makes it more accessible because it can screen read as well. So again, for accessibility tools, that's a really nice one. And again, we're looking at dual coding, so thinking about not just having text everywhere, but having it where there's a visual representation alongside a pictorial. So those of you who are familiar with CPA, so that concrete pictorial abstract concept from maths and computing science, dual coding, not that dissimilar. Written text, pictorial representation means that we're tackling the verbal and non-verbal. So for people who like visual rather than people who like to quickly scan and read, and again, it means that that knowledge is absorbed. So being able to upload both of those into a OneNote, or using your OneDrive to create a document, or again, something simple like things like notes on your phone if young people don't have access to devices. All of these digital tools allow young people to use a range of techniques. It allows them to assess what they feel about their knowledge and their learning, identify where they might have gaps, revisit it all, and again, using asking young people to create sort of media-rich resources, so animations, adverts, all these kind of products for perhaps a subject that might not necessarily spring straight to mind, means that they're having to go through the storyboarding process, they've had to plan out their learning, they've identified where their gaps, and they can then share them easily. And again, all of these tools allow moderation, so you can go in, you can give instant feedback, you can mark up really easily, and again, that takes a physical document that might be in somebody's house straight to a device that is accessible, that you can then mark up on screen using digital inking, and they can take it straight back down to them. So again, it's that whole live interaction and completed audio and visuals, and using things like podcasts, using things like creation videos, all really easily done in these tools. And there's a range of apps as well that are available if you're an Apple person. And linking to the moderation cycle we're moving through, so again, they're matching up to their success criteria, which again can be a nice way to tab and formulate your OneNote. That's how I used to do it with my class that I shared my OneNote with when I was still in school. You can then ensure that you've got that balance between assessment by using programs such as forms, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. And we're then moving on to evaluating. So if it's okay to move across, next slide please, Louise. So we've got a range of tools that support learners to evaluate their understanding and also give you an oversight as well. So we've got forums that's listed there. Stream is in the middle, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. Sway, at the bottom we've got podcasts and plickers. So plickers are essentially a type of QR code if you've not seen it. Simply A, B, C, D around the side, and you can do a quick assessment. So you can do a quick evaluation to see understanding, gauge learners' understanding and how they're feeling about their learning. You can also use within Teams, you'll see listed there rubrics and insights. So if you're using Teams, but you've perhaps not looked at the insights data, that allows you to see where your learners are engaging. So if you've got a learner who's consistently engaging, it then allows you to see, oh, they're not engaging so much with this unit perhaps. Is there a reason around their learning that they're finding challenging? Perhaps that's something that can be then discussed teacher to pupil or peer to peer, and it can be used. I can see in the chat somebody saying whoop whoop stream, so I'll explain a little about that. So stream could be used at the planning phase when learners are creating plans, and they could do that whole video based thing. For those of you who are not aware, Stream is a video tool which allows you to upload content and share it in a group or a team. It is in the process of being rolled out inside Glow. It is Microsoft owned, so you might see the logo appear, but the icons may be greyed out, but the rollout is soft rollout. So once all of that process is rolled out to all of our many hundreds of thousands of users, then it will come online. It will allow you to upload an instructional video, go through that whole process, explain. So you could be using screen recorder to go through, but your learners, more importantly, could be using screen recorder to capture their process, share that live with you for you to then get feedback and comment, and that can be shared with a group, a team. It can be shared in a range of ways. So it is coming. If you go to Glow Connect and search the word stream rather, you'll find some guidance around it of what is potentially coming out shortly. So that links us back to us our learners creating the content for where they're planning, us to moderate where they are, them to create the resources and what their goals were, go back, revisit that whole structure. They could create a sway and again show the progress, use it as a timeline, upload visual content, audio content, and a range of hyperlinks out. And they can use Plickers and they can also use podcasts. One thing I would say with forums as well is if you've used it to gauge where your lesson or where the learners are before they start a project or where they start interdisciplinary learning, there's no point in creating an entirely new forum at the end. Consider copying your forum and removing the questions that you know that everybody has right, so that again learners can see that natural progression. They're able to identify where it was, where there were gaps in their learning, but then they're able to then apply it. They've been able to learn, fill those gaps, apply understanding, and then they've got that new knowledge that's meant that they can complete it. And because you can export it as an Excel, that can be shared with that learner through their OneNote. So again, it's that whole almost cyclical model for the learner that ties nicely in with, for you, the cyclical model for moderation. So lots and lots there that are there. I would also say it's not on that, but and I was thinking about this just before the call, while the call was starting actually. One of the other apps that's not listed there because it's not in Glow is the Post-it app. If you haven't used it, it's really useful, so it might be worth checking out. Any apps that we're recommending that are not within Glow, please check with your local authority though before you maybe start rolling it out and using it. Just check that it's applicable, but Post-its doesn't capture data, so you should be all right.